April 21, 2007. The Atacama Desert, Chile. Altitude: 21,942 feet above sea level. That is higher than any four-wheeled vehicle has ever climbed in the history of the automobile. Two Chilean men, Gonzalo Bravo and Eduardo Canales, are sitting inside a machine that, by every logical standard, should not exist up here. Their hands are trembling, not from fear, from altitude sickness. The air is so thin up here that internal combustion engines starve for oxygen. Metal contracts, rubber cracks, human lungs scream. And yet, the engine keeps turning. The wheels keep biting. The vehicle keeps climbing. It shatters the world record previously held by a Jeep Wrangler, leaving behind a sign the Jeep team had planted in the rock, a sign that arrogantly read, "Jeep parking only." All others don't make it up here anyway. It was a tiny, boxy, barely there Japanese off-roader that originally couldn't even reach 75 miles per hour. A car so small it barely qualifies as a car at all by American standards. A vehicle that was born from a bankrupt company nobody had ever heard of, powered by an engine smaller than your kitchen blender. Its name is the Suzuki Jimny, and this is its story. To understand the Jimny, you first have to understand Japan in the 1960s. The country was rebuilding itself from the ashes of World War II at a speed that stunned the world. Factories that once made weapons now made cars. Engineers who once built warplanes now designed family sedans. And through all of it, the hunger, the ambition, the relentless drive to prove something to the world, one segment of the market remained wide open, untouched, waiting. The off-road vehicle, the all-terrain machine, the go-anywhere, haul-anything, never-say-die workhorse that farmers, loggers, mountain people, and adventurers desperately needed. Japan had mountains. Japan had forests. Japan had rice paddies and fishing villages and logging camps tucked into valleys that no regular vehicle could reach. The people who lived and worked there needed something rugged, something dependable, something that laughed at mud and sneered at steep grades. The military Jeep was there, imported from America. But it was expensive, complicated, and frankly, too big for Japan's narrow, winding mountain roads. What these workers needed was a Japanese solution, small, affordable, tough as the mountains themselves. In 1967, a tiny, almost invisible Japanese automaker called the Hope Motor Company took a swing at this gap. Their vehicle was called the Hope Star on 360. It was remarkably basic, 2 seats, no doors, a Mitsubishi engine barely larger than a lawnmower's, and a 4-wheel drive system sturdy enough to take it off-road. Top speed, 70 kilometers per hour, roughly 43 miles per hour flat out. In 4-wheel drive, about 18 miles per hour. In total, Hope Motor Company sold exactly 15 of these vehicles in Japan. They exported 30 more to Southeast Asia. That was it. 45 cars. The company was swallowed by debt, drowned in the costs of trying to bring a new vehicle to market, and simply collapsed. Hope Motor Company died. The Hope Star died with it. And the dream of a small, affordable, Japanese off-road machine seemed to die too. Except, Suzuki was watching. And Suzuki was interested. Suzuki bought the remnants of Hope Motor Company in 1968. They bought the rights. They bought the design concepts. And most importantly, they bought the idea. The notion that Japan needed a small, capable, 4-wheel drive machine that working people could actually afford. But Suzuki wasn't going to make the same mistakes Hope had made. They had resources. They had manufacturing muscle. They had a sales network. And they had engineers who'd spent years thinking about this exact problem because, you see, Suzuki had already been studying a remarkable little Austrian vehicle called the Stairpuck Haflinger. They'd purchased one, torn it apart, analyzed every bolt and bushing, trying to understand the language of compact off-road engineering. Now, with the Hope Star design in hand, they had everything they needed. 2 years of development work followed. 2 years of testing, revising, breaking things on purpose, and figuring out how to make them unbreakable. And then, in April of 1970, the Suzuki Jimny was born. The first Jimny, officially called the LJ10, which stood for Light Jeep, was a revelation. Not because it was sophisticated. It wasn't. Not because it was fast or comfortable or refined. It was none of those things. It was a revelation because it existed, and nothing else like it did. Under the hood sat a tiny, air-cooled, two-stroke, twin-cylinder engine displacing just 359 cubic centimeters. To give you some perspective, a modern Harley-Davidson Milwaukee 8 engine is over 5 times larger than this. The Jimny's engine would have been considered modest in a go-kart, but it produced 25 horsepower, and in that lightweight, stripped-down little body, 25 horsepower was enough to be genuinely remarkable off-road. Suzuki engineered the LJ10 to meet Japan's K-car regulations, a government classification for ultra-small, tax-advantaged vehicles. Keep the engine under 360 cubic centimeters, keep the body under a certain length and width, and your buyers pay dramatically less in taxes and registration fees. For a vehicle intended for rural farmers and mountain workers, this was not a minor consideration. This was the difference between I can afford it and I can't. The spare tire was mounted inside the cab, an unusual choice, but it kept the overall length under the K limit and gave the back a third seat. Four-wheel drive was engaged manually. Low range was available for brutal terrain. The body and ladder frame were separate, a design philosophy that Jeep had pioneered and that Suzuki would stick with across every single generation of the Jimny, forever. Nearly 5,000 LJ10s sold in Japan in 1970 alone. Over 6,000 in 1971. Production had initially been subcontracted and done mostly by hand, but Suzuki quickly realized the Jimny needed its own dedicated assembly line. The demand was unlike anything they'd planned for. The Japanese working man had spoken. He wanted this little thing, and he wanted it badly. But Suzuki wasn't content to stay still. In 1972, the LJ20 arrived, updated with a water-cooled engine instead of air-cooled, improving reliability and meeting the era's tightening emission standards. Power crept up to 28 horses. Top speed hit 80 kilometers per hour. Left-hand drive was introduced, signaling something significant. Suzuki was thinking about the wider world. By 1975, the family was growing. The LJ50 appeared with a larger three-cylinder engine, still two-stroke, still gloriously primitive, originally aimed at Australia. But more export markets followed. Germany received them. The United States received a handful through independent importers. The little Jimny was discovering that its appeal wasn't confined to Japanese mountain roads. Wherever roads ended, people wanted a Jimny. By the early 1980s, the Jimny had evolved into its second generation, the SJ series. These were proper vehicles now. 4-stroke engines. Disc brakes on the front. 5-speed gearboxes. A choice of soft-top convertibles, metal hardtops, and long-wheelbase pickup trucks. Still rugged, still basic, still smaller than everything else on the market, but undeniably more civilized than the original LJ10. And they were brilliant off-road. Genuinely, astonishingly brilliant. The combination of lightweight construction, proper four-wheel drive with a transfer case and selectable low range, solid beam axles front and rear, and recirculating ball steering gave the SJ series an off-road capability that shamed vehicles 2 and 3 times its price. America noticed. For the 1986 model year, Suzuki officially launched the SJ413 in the United States, renamed the Samurai. The name, derived from Japan's legendary feudal warriors, suited the vehicle perfectly. Small, precise, devastatingly effective in its element. Not to be underestimated. The price tag was $6,200. For a genuine four-wheel drive machine with a transfer case, switchable high and low range, solid axles, and real off-road capability, that was jaw-dropping. Americans who'd been priced out of Jeeps and full-size trucks suddenly had an option. A real option. By the early 1980s, the Jimny had evolved into its second generation, the SJ series. These were proper vehicles now. 4-stroke engines. Disc brakes on the front. 5-speed gearboxes. A choice of soft-top convertibles, metal hardtops, and long-wheelbase pickup trucks. Still rugged, still basic, still smaller than everything else on the market, but undeniably more civilized than the original LJ10. And they were brilliant off-road. Genuinely, astonishingly brilliant. The combination of lightweight construction, proper four-wheel drive with a transfer case, and selectable low range, Solid beam axles front and rear and recirculating ball steering gave the SJ series an off-road capability that shamed vehicles 2 and 3 times its price. America noticed. For the 1986 model year, Suzuki officially launched the SJ413 in the United States, renamed the Samurai. The name, derived from Japan's legendary feudal warriors, suited the vehicle perfectly. Small, precise, devastatingly effective in its element. Not to be underestimated. The price tag was $6,200. For a genuine four-wheel drive machine with a transfer case, switchable high and low range, solid axles, and real off-road capability, that was jaw-dropping. Americans who'd been priced out of Jeeps and full-size trucks suddenly had an option. A real option. Then, in the summer of 1988, everything changed. And not for the better. Consumer Reports magazine published one of the most explosive automotive reviews in American media history. Their testers claimed the Suzuki Samurai was dangerously prone to rollover, that in emergency maneuvers, the vehicle's narrow track and high center of gravity made it likely to tip over. They called it not acceptable. They recommended Americans avoid it entirely. The fallout was immediate and severe. Sales cratered. Dealers panicked. Suzuki's carefully built American reputation, still young, still fragile, took a direct hit. Suzuki fought back, calling the testing methodology flawed and biased, pointing out that their own independent testing showed nothing like the results Consumer Reports described. Years later, in 1996, Suzuki took the extraordinary step of suing Consumer Reports' publisher for libel. The case dragged on and ultimately settled, with Consumer Reports acknowledging, in their own words, that they had never intended to imply that the Samurai easily rolls over in routine driving conditions. But by then, the damage had been done. The Samurai's run in America wound down. The last ones left U.S. dealerships after 1995. The Samurai community in America didn't dissolve when Suzuki left. It grew. Modified Samurais became a staple of American off-road culture, lifted, locked, engine swapped, built into trail monsters that could tackle anything. Clubs formed. Rallies happened. Junkyard Samurais were rescued, rebuilt, and sent back into service. In the corners of America where four-wheel drive is a religion, the Samurai was and remains a saint. Here is what makes the Jimny story genuinely remarkable, not just as an off-road vehicle story, but as a story about design philosophy, engineering integrity, and the courage to not change what works. From 1970 to today, across 4 distinct generations and over half a century of production, the Suzuki Jimny has maintained a set of core design principles that are almost unique in the modern automotive world. Every single Jimny ever built, from the first LJ10 that rolled out of Suzuki's factory in 1970 to the brand new 4th-generation model on sale right now, has had the same fundamental architecture, a separate body and ladder frame. A 2-piece construction where the body bolts onto a rigid steel chassis. In today's world of integrated unibody construction, where cars and crossovers are stamped from single shells of folded steel, this is considered ancient, retrograde, old-fashioned. It is also, off-road, an enormous advantage. A body-on-frame vehicle twists and flexes without distorting its cabin structure. It can be repaired more easily. Its frame can be reinforced without touching the body. In markets where vehicles are worked hard and fixed with basic tools, this matters enormously. Every Jimny has had solid beam axles, dependent suspension, front and rear. Not independent suspension, which is lighter and better for road driving, but the kind of solid, unbreakable live axle arrangement that off-road engineers call the gold standard for serious terrain. When one wheel drops into a hole, the solid axle keeps the other wheel in contact with the ground. Maximum traction. Maximum articulation. Maximum capability. Every Jimny has had selectable four-wheel drive with a transfer case, a real low-range gear that doesn't just send power to all 4 wheels, but halves the overall gearing ratio, doubling the torque at the wheels for crawling over boulders and winching up vertical grades. In a world where four-wheel drive increasingly means a glorified traction control system with an all-wheel drive badge, this is authentic. This is the real thing. And every Jimny has had recirculating ball steering, old technology, Imprecise by modern standards on the highway, but extraordinarily durable and well-suited to the abuse of off-road driving where rocks and stumps regularly impact through the front wheels against the steering mechanism. In the automotive industry, most manufacturers talk about heritage as a marketing concept, a story they tell about their past to sell their present. The Jimny's heritage is a mechanical reality. The fourth-generation Jimny, launched in 2018, is structurally, philosophically, and fundamentally the same animal as the 1970 original. Better in every measurable way, yes, but the same creature, the same commitment, the same DNA. No other automaker can honestly say that about a vehicle that's been in continuous production for over 50 years. The true scale of the Jimny's global footprint is almost absurd to contemplate. By September of 2018, Suzuki had sold 2.85 million Jimnys in 194 countries. 194. There are 195 countries in the United Nations. The Jimny has been sold in essentially the entire world. In Australia, it wore the Sierra nameplate and became a beloved companion for the outback, the kind of vehicle that Australian farmers trusted with their lives in territory where a breakdown could mean genuine disaster. The Holden Drover was an Australian variant. The Suzuki Stockman was another. They were the same honest machine underneath, dressed for the local audience. In Pakistan, it lived as the Potohar, assembled locally in Karachi from 1984 all the way to 2006. More than 2 decades of local production. In a market where durability and repairability determine a vehicle's fate, the Jimny's simple engineering was a gift. You could fix a Potohar with basic hand tools in a dusty roadside workshop. That reliability made it legendary among a population for whom vehicles are investments, not toys. In India, under the Maruti Suzuki brand, it became the Gypsy, and the Indian military adopted it. The Indian police adopted it. For decades, if you needed a go-anywhere government vehicle in India, you wanted a Gypsy. It was still in production there until 2018. That's 33 years of essentially continuous production in a single market. A vehicle adopted by an army tends to stay in service. In Spain, a company called Santana Motor manufactured their own version, with diesel engines sourced from Renault and Peugeot, softer springs for European road comfort, cloth interiors, carpeted floors. They made the Jimny more civilized without making it less capable. European buyers who wanted something genuinely rugged but could live without Japanese spec hardship got their answer in Linares, Spain. In Thailand, the Jimny became the Caribbean, available initially with an enormous fiberglass canopy that earned it the nickname Fish Tank among locals. Later, in 1992, it was redesigned as an extended cab pickup called the Caribbean Sporty. In Indonesia, the Katana, the 2WD version introduced to dodge higher four-wheel drive taxes, spawned a universe of coach-built variants, 5-door station wagons, specialty commercial vehicles, even a replica of the classic AC Cobra, all built by local craftsmen on the Jimny's simple, adaptable platform. In Colombia, it was the Chevrolet Samurai, assembled by General Motors Colmotores in Bogotá. In New Zealand, the Farm Worker, a stripped-down, long-wheelbase Maruti Gypsy, was sold for agricultural use, legally permitted only on farms because it didn't meet road safety standards but performed so well in fields and paddocks that farmers lined up for it anyway. Every version of the Jimny was an honest answer to the question of its market. No pretension. No effort to be something it wasn't. Just the right tool, adapted for the right place, built to last longer than anyone expected. At the 1997 Tokyo Motor Show, Suzuki pulled the covers off what would become arguably the most beloved Jimny of all time, the third generation, launched in 1998 and sold for 20 incredible years. The recipe was, by now, completely familiar. Ladder frame, solid axles, selectable four-wheel drive, real low range. What changed was everything around that recipe. The suspension moved from leaf springs to coil springs, a meaningful upgrade for ride quality and suspension articulation. Electronic fuel injection replaced the old carburetors. The body was more modern, the interior more refined, the aerodynamics modestly improved. But the third-gen Jimny also did something quietly revolutionary. It made the off-road vehicle feel desirable in a new way. Not just useful. not just practical, genuinely, aesthetically appealing. Its compact proportions, its upright stance, its squared-off wheel arches, they communicated confidence, capability, a kind of cheerful toughness that was impossible not to respond to emotionally. The third gen sold everywhere.
Japan,
Europe, South America, Southeast Asia. Brazil kept building it all the way until 2022, 4 years after production ended everywhere else, because demand simply refused to stop. Colombia's Chevrolet Jimny, assembled with the 1.3-liter engine, developed a devoted following that still meets in clubs and rallies across South America today. In Europe, the third-gen Jimny achieved something remarkable. It became a style object. Urban buyers, people who would never take it off-road, bought it because of what it represented, because of its honesty, its lack of pretension. In an era of increasingly bloated, increasingly complicated, increasingly identical crossover SUVs, the Jimny was a statement. A declaration that not everything had to be optimized for the highway, that some things could remain deliberately, stubbornly themselves. By the time production finally wound down in 2018, the third-gen Jimny had sold in numbers that cemented the model's place in automotive history. 20 years, one platform, millions of believers. Let's go back to that mountain. Because the story of Gonzalo Bravo and Eduardo Canales on Ojos del Salado in 2007 deserves more than a passing mention. It deserves to be understood in its full, extraordinary context. Ojos del Salado is a volcano on the border of Chile and Argentina. At 22,838 feet, it is the highest volcano on Earth. The flanks below its summit are some of the most inhospitable terrain on the planet: volcanic rock, loose scree, frozen ground, and air so thin that internal combustion engines lose enormous amounts of power. The vehicle these two men chose for their attempt was a Suzuki Samurai, a second-generation SJ413. The platform that, in stock form, makes 63 horsepower and was never intended by its engineers to operate at altitudes above, say, the elevation of a moderately tall ski resort. They modified it substantially, widened the track for stability, upgraded the suspension, fitted special tires, and, critically, fitted a supercharged version of Suzuki's G16A four-cylinder engine. A supercharger forces more air into the engine under pressure, compensating for the thin atmosphere at extreme altitude. This was their third attempt. On the first, weather had driven them back. On the second, an engine fire had nearly killed them and destroyed the vehicle entirely. The rebuilt machine sat before them now. The mountain loomed above. The Jeep team sign, Jeep parking only, waited somewhere up there in the freezing silence. The Guinness World Records certified the achievement in July 2007. The record for the highest altitude ever reached by a four-wheeled motorized vehicle, held by a machine that originally cost $6,200, that Consumer Reports had called unsafe, that America had dismissed, that the automotive establishment had consistently underestimated for its entire existence. The Jimny,
the Samurai,
the underdog, at the top of the world. When Suzuki revealed the fourth-generation Jimny in 2018, the internet lost its mind. Not an exaggeration. Automotive forums crashed under the traffic. Social media erupted. Photographers who attended the reveal said the media scrum was unlike anything they'd seen outside of a Ferrari or a Lamborghini launch. People were reacting to something that went beyond the vehicle's specifications. They were reacting to the courage of the design. Because in 2018, the automotive industry had collectively decided that off-road vehicles should look like luxury hotel lobbies. That they should have 12-inch touchscreens and ambient lighting and massaging seats and 500 horsepower. That rugged was a marketing word, not a mechanical commitment. And then Suzuki showed up with this. A boxy, upright, deliberately retro-styled little machine that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd fallen in love with the original LJ series and simply wanted to build a better version of that dream. Round headlights, flat hood, squared-off fenders. A shape that practically announced, I am not trying to be anything I'm not. Under the styling was the same mechanical philosophy that had defined every Jimny since 1970. Ladder frame, solid axles, selectable four-wheel drive with a genuine transfer case. real low range. And now, for export markets, a 1.5-liter engine capable of, for the first time in Jimny history, more than 100 horsepower. Not a lot by American truck standards. Plenty for a vehicle this light, this capable, and this utterly committed to doing one thing brilliantly. In January 2023, Suzuki stretched the platform into a 5-door version, 34 extra centimeters of wheelbase, genuine rear doors, actual back seat space. The Jimny had grown up. Not in character, not in mission, but in practicality, acknowledging that families and working professionals wanted the Jimny experience without contorting themselves to exit the vehicle's tiny rear quarters. The waiting lists for the 4th-generation Jimny in markets across Europe, Asia, and Australia stretched to years. Literal years. Suzuki's production couldn't keep pace with the hunger for this vehicle. In some countries, dealers reported buyers willing to pay premiums of 30 and 40% above sticker price just to avoid the wait. This is what genuine automotive love looks like. Not manufactured hype, not marketing campaigns. Just people deciding, in enormous numbers, that this particular machine is worth waiting for. We are living in an era of automotive excess. The average new vehicle sold in America today weighs more than 4,500 pounds. The average new pickup truck is larger, in every dimension, than the original M1 Abrams battle tank. Our vehicles have facial recognition systems, heated armrests, ventilated cup holders, and 1,000-watt sound systems. They can parallel park themselves and brake themselves and, in some cases, drive themselves. And yet, something has been lost. Something intangible but real. The connection between driver and machine. The sense that you are operating a vehicle rather than being transported by one. The feeling of capability earned, not electronically approximated. The Jimny has never lost this. In its plainness, its smallness, its refusal to be anything other than exactly what it is, a compact, rugged, honest off-road tool, it preserves something precious. The experience of engaging with terrain directly, of selecting four-wheel drive by hand, of feeling every stone and rut and grade through the steering wheel and the seat, of arriving somewhere remote not because your navigation system found it, but because you got yourself there. For the American classic car community, a community built on love for machines that demanded your full attention and rewarded your skill, the Jimny speaks a familiar language. It is the spirit of the original Willys MB, the CJ3A, the early Bronco, the FJ40. Vehicles built not for comfort, but for capability. Vehicles that trusted the driver to be competent and capable and present. The classic car community knows this truth better than anyone. The machines that form the deepest bonds are not the ones with the most features. They are the ones with the most character. The ones that make driving an act of engagement rather than an act of passive transportation. By that measure, the Jimny, in any of its generations, is one of the great classic vehicles of the modern era. Not despite its simplicity, because of it. In 1968, a tiny Japanese company called Hope Motor Company sold 45 vehicles and went bankrupt. Their dream died. Their factory closed. Their workers went home. By every measure, they had failed. But hope in the most literal sense was not dead. Suzuki picked up that hope, held it carefully, and built something from it that has lasted over half a century. Something that has climbed the world's highest volcano. Something that has served armies and farmers and fishermen and adventurers and urban dreamers across 194 countries. Something that has outsold the Jeep in America, survived a Consumer Reports hit piece, spawned 1,000 customs and modifications and passionate communities on every continent. The Suzuki Jimny is not the fastest vehicle ever built. It is not the most powerful or the most luxurious or the most technologically advanced. It is, by objective measure, a small, simple machine that costs less than almost any comparable off-road vehicle on the market. But it is, by the measure that matters most, the measure of enduring love, of genuine capability, of honest purpose faithfully served, one of the greatest automobiles the world has ever produced. A vehicle that knew exactly what it was from the day it was born, and never once pretended to be anything else. From the rice paddies of rural Japan to the summit of Ojos del Salado. From a bankrupt factory in 1968 to a global waiting list in 2024. From 25 horsepower and 75 kilometers per hour to a world altitude record that professional off-roaders with far more expensive machinery have never beaten. This is the Suzuki Jimny, the little car that refused to quit. And if history has proven anything, it never will.